Speaking Eurovision fans, my name is Ewan. My pronouns are he and him, and joining me today is.
If I can find a mute button, it is Angus, also using he, him pronouns. Very happy to be here.
Thank you for joining me. So today we are going to be discussing Pabandom Iš Naujo, Lithuania's selection show for Eurovision. So we did a video prior to the final, as you may remember. I wax lyrical about my favorites. So now we're discussing the post show, the results, and everything that's happened with that since. So just the first question, Angus, what are your thoughts on like the results of the show in general?
Uh, I'm quite happy. I mean, I really like most of the songs in the entire competition and also in the final. So that you don't see me complaining too much. My favorite didn't win, but we'll get into that later a bit, I think. But yeah, overall, like I was pretty happy just with how, yeah, just on the basic results basically are pretty all right.
So did you feel that there were any shocking results there, or did everything sort of go the way that you expected?
I mean, I will never understand how Popera is so popular. So Il Senso getting any televotes feels foreign to me, but I know that's just a me thing. And beyond that, it did feel roughly in line of also based on what we saw in the semifinals and in the heats, plus just the general vibe that all the songs were giving off. It did feel, I don't want to say predictable because of course we had a tie, which is always a surprise, and then there was a bit of chaos about like what's the tiebreaker that nobody was really sure about for a hot second. But yeah, no, overall I wasn't too surprised by who finished where.
Yeah, I think I'm the same. Like it was very, in a sense, predictable, but also not predictable because it's Lithuania and what you expect to win. But it does actually make sense in like the grand scheme of things. Um, I was actually surprised that Petunia didn't win, just until looking back on all the performances. When watching it live, I was just convinced that was going to be the winner. I didn't think it before the show, but just watching it then, but then looking back, it sort of makes sense who won. So of course, the winner was Stay by Monika and Kita. What are your thoughts on it? And how do you think it'll
Uh,
do in the fight in Liverpool?
I like it. I don't love it, but I do like the version presented in the final. I did she already also do the Lithuanian bit in the semis? I'm not sure, but
So there was a little bit of it towards the end, but the full Chuto Tuto part um throughout the entire song wasn't there.
yeah, no, I do like that addition. It improves the song a lot for me. Uh, I like Monica's previous Eurovision performance. I know she's good on stage. She has good stage presence, so I do think at Eurovision she'll do pretty well. Some people are overrating this song's chances, I think. I've heard people compare the Shuto Tutos to the Biti Strava moment from Incorpore Sano or to Soldi in Soldi, like the clapping moment. I'm like, that is perhaps demanding a bit too much from the song and its impact. At the same time, the people saying like nobody's going to vote for this, there's the wine mum, and the wine mum sympathetic demographic is going to eat this up for the most part.
The
So
fact that that's so fitting for me is very applicable.
exactly right. So I'm not sure. I could see it strong. I do feel that this is another one of the songs that if it makes it to the final, I see it doing better with the juries than with the televote, at least how you typically expect from Lithuanian entries. That being said, I do think it has the power to make it out of the semi-final. Where it would finish in the final, I think, yeah, somewhere around the middle of the scoreboard, roughly, or a bit lower, depending on who else qualifies, running order, etc. But that's sort of where I think it should finish. And yeah, as for the song, it's all right. I don't have many complaints about it. I don't feel very strongly about it either way, but it's well sung. It's well constructed song as well. Like that's always something that I appreciate anyway. And the production is good as well. It's just a well produced song as well, which is always just a good thing to have, like a good place to start from.
So I'm a little bit biased in my thoughts on Stay because it is my favorite of the year. Um, so in my heart of hearts, it's going to win. But realistically thinking, I think it's something that's going to be again mid-table. I do think it it's solidly going to qualify, especially like in the position where it is in that semi-final, being right before the end and having like a more emotional moment right before Australia, like a big heavy rock song. It's I think it's going to make it stand out with people. Um, I do really like that she did up the Lithuanian parts because I thought it was a good song. It was I think it was my third or fourth prior to the final, but then it just elevated it so much the way that she connected with the backing singers, and it just created like such a good moment. And think that that can be replicated because I have heard some rumors that she's potentially not having backing singers in Liverpool, and that's being pre-recorded, and I think that will be massively detrimental to the song because I think her singing with those backing singers really elevates it and really like gets it to connect people. And I think even without them, she'll probably still qualify, but I think it will hurt the chances because it doesn't. Lithuania is not good at staging. That there's been maybe two good stagings in the entire history of Lithuania Eurovision, like 2009, 2015, coincidentally. For those of you who didn't know, Monika actually did participate with Valdis Bamala in 2015. So adding more to the vocal power, the impact to it, because the staging is going to suffer. Because I know countries will change now and then, but it's a foregone conclusion. A foregone conclusion. Like the staging isn't going to be phenomenal. So I do think it's going to lose some impact and probably a lot of votes, and maybe push it down into that lower quarter rather than mid table. I think with a really good running order, it is something that could sort of scrape that the end of the top 10, but I think it's unlikely to happen, but there is still a possibility of it there. Um, yeah, overall, I think it was a good choice for Lithuania to send. But moving on to some of the other songs in this selection, what were sort of the standout songs for you? And do you think any of the others should have won in the grand scheme of things?
I mean, I'll keep it limited to the finalists because there were some already early eliminations that were heartbreaking for me. Um, but yeah, from the finalists, my favorite was Solo by Rutamur. That's just that 80s. It has a very much Berlin slash German vibe to me, and that is sort of music that I really connect with. Um, I liked Moonby's song more than I probably should have. Uh, Obviously, like so many You Stays Need More Fun was great. That's the song that I could like. I'm not surprised it finished eighth out of 10, but that's a song that I could have seen finish higher. I'd like a movie. Almost everyone liked like a movie by Beatrice. I'd say all of those songs have, well, their path to the Eurovision final have been a bit different. I think the end result in general would have been roughly the same for these. The one song that I was a bit less warm, but still also really liked for that I haven't mentioned yet really is Let Me Think About Me, which was the most standard pop banger, arguably left in the final at least. That one could have been very hit or miss at Eurovision. Like that one I could see not qualifying, but also easily getting top 10. That one has sort of the most extremes in its results, I think. But yeah, no, as I said, there were just so many good. I could mention all the other ones except the Popra song because I almost never connect to Popra entries. So sorry, Il Senso. Although I must say, if any of them are watching, your performance in the final was so much better than in the heat that you were in. Like in that first heat, it was a bit rough, but in the final, you really did bring good vocals, and also just your stage presence was just so much more confident that even then I was like, I would be all right with this going to Eurovision.
Yeah, I think we broadly have the sort of the same thing. So same thoughts on this. I did like every single song in the final. I did have a couple of again that were heartbreaks from the heats, but I won't go into that. The two that sort of really stood out for me were Maro Eunice with Do What You Do and Solo by Rutamur. I think everyone that's heard Solo by Rutamur loved it and has loved it. I've genuinely not heard a single negative opinion about that song. But at the same time, I think it might have struggled a little bit more to get to the final. It probably would do better than stay in the final, but I think that their path to that final, like saying, it's not as simple, because it's a little bit more divisive, which is better for a pure televote semi-final, but there's a lot more competition with other songs. Like there's nothing really similar in the semi-final, but it doesn't stand out as much compared to the other songs, particularly in the second half of that semi-final. So I think ultimately they made the right choice in sending Stay. And I do think it's going to have that a bit more impact. Wouldn't It wasn't my main choice, but yeah, I think it is the correct opinion. Um, so yeah, moving on. How did you feel about the contest as a whole? Like, did you enjoy watching it when you did watch it, or not?
I did enjoy it. I mean, the heats in the semis they zipped by pretty quickly, which I do appreciate. Like on the one hand, we do get a good showcase of the Lithuanian music scene in a certain sense because you have all this musical variety and everyone has a genuine shot at getting like a qualifying further on because first of all there's a fair number of slots to be spread around between everyone, but also you just don't know who's going to qualify because there's such musical diversity, and as we already said, it is Lithuania. You never know what's happening there. um yeah, I did have a good time watching it. That there are some points, but that goes a bit more into the structure, which I believe we want to get into in a bit as well, where I have there are ways that the show can improve and the contest can improve as a whole, but such as both the way of showcasing Lithuanian music and picking a song for Eurovision, I think it does its job very well, and that's always the main two things the national final has to do. I mean, obviously, the song selection helped. If I didn't like most of the songs, I would have been having a different conversation here. But I do think that the Lithuanian broadcaster has a good eye for selecting good songs to have in its national final.
Yeah, I think I broadly agree. Like it is my favorite national selection, so I am a bit biased, but I do think it has definitely improved in recent years. It used to be a lot more tedious, I think is probably the best word, in the way that it presented the songs and just having the big long video and then the huge discussion afterwards, like potentially for 5 minutes discussing the song with the juries. And it does slow down and break up the show a lot. And I don't really think, although I enjoyed it, I think previously, I think the current format of just sort of like going through in rapid succession and just really showcasing the songs, I think it's better from a production standpoint and it's a lot more entertaining to watch. And I do understand why Pabandom Iš Naujo has become a lot more fun to watch from people who are not particularly like fans of Lithuania. Of course, we're speaking as Eurovision fans, like we're not the target audience. Um, so I can't speak of like this change is as reflecting like like what Lithuanians are wanting. But I mean, the show's gone from strength to strength, so I assume that that's what's happening. But yeah, I think overall it's much better in its like production values, and I'm really like happy to see that. So yeah, well, actually, moving on to the structure of the show, which you mentioned, it's like, is there anything that you would change or?
Um, People who regularly listen to our podcasts or discussion videos will know that I have many times accused juries of double dipping, by which I mean a lot of the time, some or all of the people that are involved in the national final as the jury are also responsible for selecting what songs get to perform there in the first place, which is sort of my first problem. In Lithuania's case, I would even say it's sort of triple dipping because they also get to discuss the songs before slash while people are voting, which for me sort of raised the question of like how much are people getting influenced by the juries, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like I think there's an argument to be made of it's good for people to listen to expert musicians and people in the music industry. What do they have to say about the songs? At the same time, I feel that you get stuff like people might get influenced by that, which might be detrimental to how then is at Eurovision, because at Eurovision, obviously, people don't get this kind of jury information. Also, in some ways it might be unfair in presenting what songs are actually popular in general, because what might get radio airplay might still be dragged down by the judges. And if people just hear like, oh, this song is not so great because I feel it's too reminiscent of songs X, Y, or Z, something we also saw in Belgium, right? That feels like potentially like it has an unfair influence in also showing what the televote result could be. Plus, you get also the risks of tactical voting. These are all very like meta, and I care about this kind of stuff discussions that I'm having here. But it is something that I have a slight issue with, even though I do appreciate that we do get to actually hear what what part of the jury at least thinks of the songs. Like I do appreciate knowing more about the decision making. At the same time, I do appreciate the transparency a lot. I mean, beyond that, in the final, they did one thing that I always find unforgivable, and that is having an interval act between the actual competing songs. I get why from if you purely see it as a televised event slash as a music festival kind of deal, if you want to sell it like that, it works. But taking it as a competition, which it also is, whether you want to call it a national final or even if on a much smaller scale you have a battle of the bands somewhere, you do not have, if you have an interval act or a guest act, you do not put that in between the competing songs. That breaks up the flow and again can unfairly influence songs beyond what the running order already does. So those are my notes, but at the same time, I do like how Lithuania is just peculiar and doing its own thing. As I said, it does have its transparency bonuses as well. So I'm not fully against it. I just feel shaking the order around a bit. Keep on thinking what you're doing. They're clearly still experimenting a bit in Lithuania. They're definitely on the right path, but I think they can get even better.
So for me, I think the thoughts on the structure of the show, there's one thing that I really want to change, and that is, well, actually, there's a few things I want to change. That I really want to change is the heats. Going from two heats into two semifinals into the final, I feel like this heats have too much in them because you're going 30 songs, that's 15 each semifinal, and sorry, 15 each heat. And that is a lot of songs because they are going quite fast with them. And I get some people love 26 song national finals, not to name anything specific. Um, but I think for Heat, in the style of show that Pabandom Iš Naujo is, it doesn't work and you're not showcasing the songs enough. So I really think that changing up and having three three heats, the two semifinals, then one final, and then just breaking it down like that would be a better way to go. Also with a 10 song national final, I feel that's too much for what Lithuania is presenting because a lot of the songs had no chance of winning. Um, and you're going in a three stage selection. Like if you have a big semi-final and a final, having 10 songs is acceptable. But when you're already having three stages, I feel it should be narrowed down a lot more. You've already heard what the viewers, what the listening public want. So realistically, there's never going to be a final where there's 10 potential winners. You've already heard the public's opinions. You don't really need that many songs there. And I get like it's adding more to the show, but you can add filler with like interval acts, more discussions. Like there's other things you can do with that, and I feel it detracts from the competitiveness of it. Something else which is more applicable to the heats and the semifinals, going between the heats and the semis and then into the finals. The shows, the first stage and second stage shows are pre-recorded, and I think it's Wednesday or Tuesday, one days, and then it's done on Saturday, and then they go to the next week. So for those ones that are in the second, like the second semi-final going into the final, those acts are not having a lot of time to really process like what's been done. in what's been said in the semifinals, like how they can adapt their songs. And I think it is detrimental because if you have a multi-stage format, artists should be allowed to take on that feedback. So going between these different stages, the artists are not really given enough time to really adapt. And I think that was a lot more prevalent when it was like a four-stage show. But now in three stages, not as prevalent. But it's blatantly obvious that it is pre-recorded, and it does take something from that. I did say in the pre-show video, it's about how it does detract from it. It it doesn't really add to the show, and I feel it would be a lot more fun to watch if there was that live aspect of it, because there are times where it does just feel like a VT, and I would just love to see like all of the shows live. The final thing, it, it's the voting system. I'm so done with the Eurovision style voting between televotes and jury votes. It doesn't work. Like if you look at the final results, if I just get them up, sorry. So it was ultimately the show was a tie break between Monika and Monika and Ruta. But there was less than 200 televotes between Ruta and Monica, but that's 10 and 12 votes. So they all both got 22 in total, and then the reverse for the jury votes. So Monica got 10 and Ruta got sorry, Monica got 12 and Ruta got 10. But there was a good 10% margin of difference between their votes, but it's being presented as this really tight race. And I don't really think that works. I don't think non-proportional televotes work because you do end up with a situation where something could be super, super close. And there have been other national finals, not to name names, where something is super close in the actual aggregate points, but there's a huge gulf in the televote or a huge gulf in the jury votes, and it doesn't really make sense. And particularly like those in the heats and the semi-finals, where there's songs that are close to qualifying, songs that are getting zero, but they're still getting a good few hundred votes, but something's like dominating the televote when it's not really getting that many votes. And I think overall it's hurting a lot of national selection shows, and I really want to see this changed. Yeah, Angus, you did mention your song, and I know this is controversial, but your song is the only national selection that's had a sensible voting system this year.
Fair. I would actually like to defend Iceland on the voting system, but beyond that, did want to agree with you on the voting system. Just go fully proportional, because then you also avoid the issue that we had now with the tie. Plus, also, I'm always if there's a tiebreaker, I'm always in favor of going for the televote first, for both show reasons and result reasons. Even if I would
See,
just
spiritually, I want to say it should always be the televote. However, the jury always agrees with me in all of these situations. So
I mean, frequently, yes, but at the same time, I'm like, but if you go fully proportional, the chance of a tie is so much smaller. The other thing I want to know is, and this is mostly to also, this is me hating on two countries for a short second, one of them being Lithuania, the other one being Malta, have a sensible number of things. Malta had three quarterfinals and then one semi-final and then one final. Here again, we have two semi-finals, which, okay, makes sense for my brain. Good, I'm happy. Why do you then also have two heats? Make at least have more heats. Ideally, actually have four heats, I'd say even. It wouldn't work with 30 artists. You need to rummage around like, do we allow some more people in? How many more? How do you want to do it? But I'm just like, it just makes sense from a bracketing system and from a mathematical idea, and everyone has like truly an equal shot all the time. It also feels just much more pleasant for my brain. This was also just I need to once again mention why does Malta have three quarterfinals and then one semi? Because that still confuses me to this day.
the huge Maltese semis just always just baffle me. Like there you're wanting to like spread it out and get more views for the whole contest. Like add an extra semi. It just makes it so much. Also, someone doesn't have to sit through what 20 songs. Um, but yeah, so moving
Lithuania.
well, um, so moving on to the production of the show itself. Was there anything like particularly that stood out for you that how they did the show and like what the production sorry any parts of the production that were good for you or that you liked?
I feel that And in general, I must say this is true for all, like also for Estonia and Latvia. Just the Baltic countries are really killing it with their staging at their national finals, despite the, as they themselves say, limited budget that everyone is having to make their staging, and that they have to also organize these national finals. That just every song really gets its own feeling on the stage. You really can tell, like just from the staging alone, you could tell already what song it is. And that is something that some other national finals, especially last year, I'm not going to mention names like Germany, were missing. So that is just something I really appreciate on the production side of things. I would say we've already said before, more intervals. I would have loved just, I love Monika Liu. I would have loved to just hear more from her because she easily could have. She even could have done like a, she wrote this time. She wrote the 2015 entry. She could have just done a cheeky little like medley of Lithuanian Eurovision entries, and I would have eaten that up. And just enjoy. I think a few, just a bit more intervals are allowed. Like, yes, I have also complained about endless interval acts in some other national finals, but I do think if first of all your music is for a Eurovision fan, and as far as I can tell, in your country, pretty iconic by with who you invite and all that, you can get away with it. But overall, like I mean, it felt very high budget. I didn't see actually like if there were technical issues, I don't remember them or really notice them, which is also already a huge plus. That just I know that's not something that's fully in control of anyone, but not having technical issues just makes the show feel so much smoother and better, and just like a something that you really want to watch and should be watching. So I also just really appreciate that they clearly put in the effort to try and avoid any potential issues.
Um, so for me, I thought the production value was much better than it has been. Like I loved it in previous years when it was low budget because there was like a charm to it, and there can be a real charm in those sort of national selection shows. But I think the way it feels high budget, even though realistically speaking, like they are trying to conserve money, and it's come out really well. All of the VTs, um, the graphics, the hosting, just everything about it was just felt good. I do, of course, want more interviews. Something I also want to see more is more interaction with the hosts. Like, the two hosts this year were so phenomenal. Like people who are just jumping into the national selection first and like really love them. They really love the shout outs in English to the Eurovision fans. And they had like so much charisma, but there wasn't really much of them. And I feel like they could have added them more and it would have been a lot more iconic, fun Eurovision host interactions. So yeah, I do want to see a lot more of them or a lot more other hosts. So moving on to the final point, is there anything else that you want to see different from Lithuania in the future?
No, just more of their music. I like it, just more and different songs. Just keep surprising me. You've been surprising me so far, and just keep doing that. I don't think this and just keep going down this path you are of just trying out new things with every national final a bit as well. And just as professional, because yeah, as you said, just to host interactions. Instead of like maybe cut down discussions or move them to a different part, but then have like some green room like conversations. That would be fun to have as a little extra in the show, because that is genuinely something that you rightfully point out as missing.
So for I've said the things I want to change, like being live and like those little interactions are a big thing for me. Something I do really want to see changed is the how the songs are presented. So I've said this a lot in lots of different videos and things, but like Finland probably had the best way to present it. Their shows they had songs presented each night. Now you obviously when it's a 30 song national selection show, you can't do that presentation. You can't give them all that individual moment. But then when you have something like Serbia that dropped all the songs at the same time, it was good because then everyone could sit and listen to all the songs if they wanted to. But the way of like dropping the song, like oh, the artists can drop songs whenever they want, and not all of them are actually like readily available by like their first heat doesn't really work for me. I think there needs to be a lot more in that build up and like, okay, all of the songs will drop here. You can listen to them here. Something like that, it adds so much and it's a lot more easy, a lot more accessible because I think the best national finals for Eurovision fans are the ones that are more accessible. If it's easy to know what's happening, if it's easy to like follow the songs, easy to know who's competing, what the song is, people are going to be more invested. And I have seen that more over years as it's become more accessible in that way, people become more interested. And I think changing that, just having a proper, even just a proper article saying like, here's songs that are all dropping this time with them all, and then having all the videos like Denmark did, like that works. That's perfect. And I think that would just add a lot more to the experience.
Just imagine Pabandom Iš Naujo, the double CD, just the festival that can sound style. We just have an album also with just the really cool artwork. Again, Lithuania also, just like Portugal actually. The graphic design is just so good. I'm like, make more use of it. Give me that album, whether it's on streaming or whatever, but give me just a full album to listen to because I would listen to almost all these songs without skipping any of them.
I've heard so many people like love on the graphic design and just the bisexual lighting just throughout the whole show, and just like it's something that's so good. Like it's changed so much seeing how it was a few years ago, and I'm just really happy to see it. But anyway, that's all we have time for. Thank you so much for watching today. If you liked our video, please follow our channel. And if you disagree with our points, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'll be following all of the pre-parties in the build-up to Eurovision itself, so don't forget to follow us on social media at That Eurovision Podcast and That Eurovision Site on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.
See you.
Bye.